Hey, it's AC.
It's Kurt.
It's my friend Kurt. That was my line. My friend Kurt.
Sorry.
You are the Youth Ministry Nation. Let's talk youth ministry. How are you, man?
I'm good. How are you?
I am great.
Good. I haven't seen you. I haven't seen you in like a week and a half.
I know, you've been gone.
I have.
You've been gone.
I have.
Traveling the world.
Well, or just to Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Oh, yeah.
Because, as you know, some people out there might know, we have 4 international campuses, of which 3 of the 4 have youth ministries. And Buenos Aires just officially kicked off their youth ministry 3 weeks ago. And so I went down there with a couple people from our team, and we spent 5 days hanging out with them, training their volunteers. Youth Specialties has this whole Latin America side to their organization.
Yeah,
so
that was interesting.
It was awesome.
Yeah.
Spoke at their Latin America or their Argentina.
Were they calling you Hunston?
Johnston?
Yeah,
they misspelled.
Butchered his name on the big banner.
General session. It was hilarious.
The big banner.
I'll tell you what, though, it's very humbling. Seriously, very humbling. I like to think I'm kind of humble.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm probably not so humble.
Yeah.
But I was having a moment of like, man, I'm in Argentina speaking to 1,000 youth workers,
and they're going, Joe Hunston.
And then somebody takes a picture, and the big screen behind me has got my name spelled wrong, which is very humbling.
That was hilarious.
I think I've arrived, and God says, "No,
that was hilariously humbling."
Okay, so let's jump into today, AC.
Cool.
Got some emails.
Yeah.
A couple of them were very specific. They're just asking us to email them some stuff. Which, by the way, if somebody's out there watching, our church, we've got lots of resources and stuff.
Yeah.
So if you ever go, hey, can I see an example of your permission slip that you use, or a letter that you would send out to parents about your sex and dating series, email one of us at the church,
totally send it to you.
We'll send it to you. That's what some of these emails are about. But today's theme, based on this one email, it's just one email, but it's a really good theme, is his subject line is, what about small churches?
What about small churches?
And he makes a comment in there early on that he says, it seems like our show talks a lot about large church youth ministry. We probably would be very defensive and say, oh, no, we don't. We talk about youth ministry. But the reality is our context is a larger context, so it's likely that, right? I mean, it's likely that it's...
Unless he only watched like 2-3 shows.
The one show where we said, instead of what about small churches, it was, what about mega churches?
Mega churches.
Did we do a show like that? We did not do a show like that.
Okay. That would be funny.
So,
button, mega churches.
So... as I read this, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's a long email, but I'll highlight parts. And as we were reading this, I was thinking, this is Youth Ministry 101 for all sorts of people out in the Youth Ministry Nation.
Yeah, totally.
So we'll just read some of it. He just says, our church is small. We've seen 4 of our 12 kids come to Christ, but our church is very small. He works 40 hours or more at a different full-time job because he's not on staff, doesn't get paid to get staff, all that kind of stuff. Limited budget, almost non-existent. So much of anything we do has to come out of pocket. We don't have a mass amount of people that are willing to volunteer. So already he's identifying this is small church stuff, right?
Yep.
I've got another job. I do this thing as a volunteer myself. I don't have a bunch of volunteer help.
I don't want help.
We don't have a budget, so I'm paying for stuff myself, right? I mean, he's in the thick of it. We don't have a bunch of volunteers because most of the congregation is older. 3 or 4 parents that are willing to be helpful, but their work schedule ties them up.
Yep.
Right? So this prevents us from doing very many activities or events. He's also involved in other areas of the church. He leads on the worship team. He helps on their social media team. So that makes it tough for him to do stuff. Cost of living being high there. He can't really afford to spend extra money out of pocket on resources for the youth group. We don't have a stage. We don't have lights or anything cool like that. Our worship service for the youth is me with an acoustic guitar. We don't have a multi-purpose building or anything specifically dedicated for the youth group, right? Except for a classroom, which he has repainted on posters on. No fancy computers. They can't afford them. He doesn't make enough money to buy them. Yeah. He's also getting ready to start college at Liberty University, on and on, right? And then he says this. Do you have any advice for me as for how to find more time and more resources that could help grow our youth ministry? Classic question, right? Classic. And I read that, even though I didn't read the whole thing, I mean, that is youth ministry.
Yeah.
And it always has been youth ministry. Most churches aren't led by a full-time youth pastor with a budget, and a youth room and a bunch of volunteers knocking on the door saying, how can I help?
Yeah.
Most churches are led by guys and gals in this
that are volunteers, that are
under-resourced, over-busy.
Yeah.
So what are some thoughts, AC? Just share some, not just specifically to him, but just
I would say
small church youth ministry.
I would say one of the things, I mean, I come from a small church, and I did youth ministry there. It was more of like not Bible study, but Sunday school, and then we would do like one day out of the month type of deal.
Like for an activity or something?
Yeah, for an activity. I would say my point of view is very interesting because I wasn't necessarily privy, how do you say that?
Privy
to what we have now.
Right.
So I didn't know anything about all of the resources and how other
you didn't know how it could be.
I didn't know how it could be, and so I kind of focused on what we had. You know, I kind of focused on those 6-7 students that I had in Sunday school class that I got to teach a lesson to every single week, who came, you know, wanting to learn and wanting to grow and wanting to have some fun. And so I kind of just gave my attention and my life to that. And the students that I would meet with, do the once a month over the night thing, I would just pour my heart into those two areas. A lot of the other areas didn't really exist because I didn't have a scope to grow that. I think among many things that pop up out of this email, one thing is the danger of kind of like comparing a little bit. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't have the time. You know, I may have more time than you do as a bivocational, and if I was a bivocational person and saw a person who had full time, I would totally feel like, man, am I doing enough? Am I? But the reality is, you get into a comparing game, you're going to lose that battle because you're not comparing apples to apples. You don't have the time, you don't have the capacity, and so at some point you have to go, where do I need to draw this line and be okay with that? Whether that be with, you know, our setup, our room where we are, my time to invest in getting more students, my time investing in discipling the students that I have, like where are those lines at? Because I'm spread so thin, I would give 2% to everything, and so everything will be lacking if I don't draw those lines. And I think sometimes we can get into this comparison of, man, what it should be, and we kind of lose out. We forget about what's in front of us and what's available and where we should focus on. So that's one thing that kind of points out as he kind of like goes and, you know, says, I don't have this, I don't have that, is, you know, you're not in the same situation as someone who is full-time and who has the capacity and the budget. So what does that mean for you? Draw those lines and then put your heart into that area and watch God bless that versus sitting back and trying to think of all the what if, or, you know, thinking about the large group. You're in a small context. You don't have the time that, you know, other people have, but God has given you students to pastor and to lead and volunteers to love on and care for. And so be fruitful, be faithful in that, and watch God, you know, bring fruit from that.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I think that's good stuff. My youth group that I grew up in originally was 3 kids.
Yeah.
You know, and so we didn't have budget. We had a little couch, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, and I volunteered. My junior high youth pastor, Sunday school teacher, I read this, I go, that was John.
I was sitting on the seat.
Yeah, and I had and but the reality is, it changed my life.
Were you one of the 4 or the 6?
Well, there was only 3 of us. So 4, 6.
That's an
we
awesome
can't even
number,
imagine.
Yeah,
that's like crazy growth.
Wow.
But I think sometimes I'll speak first to your comparison thing.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we forget that God can do awesome things and is doing awesome things in this youth group of, did you say a dozen
12
kids, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, 4 kids have come to Christ.
Yeah.
That's 25% of his youth group, or no, more than that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, I'm not a mathematician. 1/3 of his youth group has come to Christ in that youth group. Huge. he's doing good stuff.
Yeah.
Because he watches a show like this, because he is still young, and he knows that there's other ways. You didn't know, right? He knows, so therefore he knows I could be doing more, which is probably true. But God has you where He has you.
Yeah.
Not every church is a massive, crazy church. Not every church is even growing at at a fast pace.
Rapid pace.
So I would say to people in small churches is do the best you can with what you've got.
Yeah.
Be a good steward of what you've been given. Because that's our primary job description, I think, is not to grow our youth ministry.
Yeah.
It's not to be a charismatic leader. It's not to be the best teacher or run the funnest events. Our primary job description, I think, is to be faithful.
Yeah.
Right? Jesus says, "Well done, my good and faithful servant."
Yeah.
So your number one job description for all of us is faithfulness, where God has us.
No matter where you are, yeah.
So I would say to people in small churches who are having a hard time gaining traction, which is what this is, be faithful. Be faithful where you are and have a vision for what that next stage could look like.
Yeah.
Don't think 8 stages ahead.
Yeah.
Think 1 stage ahead.
Yeah.
So what would it take for our youth group to go from 12 to 18?
Yeah.
That'd be 50% growth, which is crazy, right? Well, we would need 2 more volunteers. Okay, well, let's start praying and slowly thinking through. Because if you start thinking we need 20 volunteers if this thing's ever going to explode, a small church youth group doesn't need to explode.
Yeah.
It just needs to be faithful and start doing some things and have a leader who's thinking a little bit about just what's next, right?
Yeah. That's
so
great.
That would be my thought.
I like how you go. I think a lot of us, especially males, we want to go the gusto.
Right.
We feel like, I can grow this thing. I want to grow it. We need 50. We need 60. And you're talking about this incremental growth that ultimately gets you where you're supposed to be, but it also keeps the integrity, of trusting God, the integrity of this, not abandoning the discipleship for just reaching out and trying to grab a bunch of students.
And do the best you can with what you've got.
Yeah.
So he's got a small room. Then you do the best you can with that.
Yeah.
He has limited resources. Then do the very best you can. Don't make the mistake of going out and charging a bunch of youth ministry stuff on your own personal credit card for the kingdom, because now you're...
And then you feel guilt. Some people get the guilt trip and feel like they need to do all that.
It's not his responsibility. At some point, the church has to make decisions too.
Yeah.
Do we want to give a little bit more resources to the youth group to help it grow?
Yeah.
Do we want to give them a little bit bigger youth room to help them grow? Do I want to make... I'm a pastor. Do I want to make announcements from the pulpit and on behalf of the youth group? So... in the meantime, his role is just, be faithful. Do the best you can with what you got. Now, some super practical stuff.
Yeah.
Super practical.
I was going to say.
Stephanie Caro. I think it's Caro. It might be Cairo. I don't know. One of those two. On the youthministry.com blog, if they go in the archives, everything she writes is from a small group, a small church youth ministry perspective. I think on simplyouthministry.com, she even has a book, like a small church youth ministry book.
Yeah.
If I was this guy, I would read her stuff. I would look at my own calendar. He's got a lot going on. He's going to go back to school. He does the church's social media, and he does the church's worship, and he's trying to do the church's youth group.
Yeah.
He might need to figure some
I was just going to ask you that question of, it seems like another issue, and this is maybe his issue, but I'm sure, even for me, when I was doing it, even though I didn't know anything else, I would say, man, I need to balance some of this out, because I was not just a Sunday school teacher.
Right.
I didn't just hang out with those guys. I was also a deacon, and I played the drums, and I'm serving in all these other areas.
And you were newly married.
And I'm newly married, and my wife is serving, and she's working. And so balance for us was, was kind of tough. So with a lot of youth workers that are at small churches that are maybe in multiple areas serving, speak to a little bit of kind of balance when the expectation may be, the pastor may be expecting you to, hey, you're serving the kingdom.
Right.
And there's this tension of, I'm serving here, and, I kind of feel like his heart is maybe being tugged in one direction, even though he's serving in other areas.
I think nobody cares more about this guy's personal life his joy factor, his ability to go to school and get good grades. Nobody's going to care more about that than he is.
Yeah.
And nobody's really paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Right? He's the only one. He's the only one who is feeling the same level of pain.
Yeah.
So he's the only one who can kind of fix it.
Yeah.
You got to take matters into your own hands and look out for yourself.
Yeah.
Not in a selfish way, but in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Balance is very hard. I mean, he's not at a stage in life. He's not going to be balanced.
Yeah.
He's going to be out of balance.
Yeah.
He's got too much going on, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of okay. He just needs to be healthy and make sure that his spiritual life and his joy and his physical health are not being completely sacrificed out of this really honorable desire to serve his church. Now, we're talking about him. What we're talking about right now is all of us.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's
regardless
all
whether
of us.
you're married
I'm not
or
paying
not.
as close attention to your marriage and your joy factor and your spiritual life as you should be.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
I'm just going, dude, can you do this? Hey, hey, what if we, right? And you have to kind of go, oh man, I got to navigate all this stuff.
I like you use the word health, which I think that's the kind of like the meter you use. That's the scale you use of how, when you can't find that balance, you can always look at health to determine that meter of what needs to be cut, what needs to change.
Well, because some people will say, oh man, you're so busy, it's unhealthy to be that busy. Well, no, it's unhealthy to be unhealthy.
Yeah.
Busyness doesn't mean you're unhealthy.
Yeah.
Right? And having a slow schedule doesn't mean you're lazy.
Yeah.
Right?
Nor does it mean you're healthy.
Nor does it mean you're healthy.
Yeah.
You could be completely slow and unhealthy too.
Yeah.
So to me, a lot of, and again, we don't know this gentleman. But I think a lot of people they're in bivocational or totally just volunteer. They're in a smaller church. They feel, and I love it, and they should. I mean, it makes sense that they do. Mm-hmm. They feel this pressure to do it all.
Yeah.
You can't do it all.
Yeah.
Nobody can do it all.
You can't.
So celebrate where you are. If you're in a small church that's not growing the way you think it should be and all that, celebrate where you are. Be faithful where you are. Have a vision for what could come next.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be guilty of being like the mentality sometimes of people who are in a cycle of abuse or a cycle of poverty. Of, well, this is all I've ever known. There's no hope. We can't get out of it. You don't want that.
Yeah.
Have a vision. Yeah. Have a hope for what God could do. So yeah. I mean, we've said a lot today, but just send us out one last super quick word of encouragement for people in small church settings.
Don't play the comparison game. Mm-hmm. Work with what God has given you. Pour your heart and all your skills and abilities into that, and trust Him to grow it.
Yep. If you have a question, email us at
talkyouthministry@gmail.com.
talkyouthministry@gmail.com. Subscribe right here. Sign up for the Simply One Day Conference. Go to simplyyouthministry.com.
Yes, it's
in a city near you this fall. It's going to be awesome.
It's like the tour.
It is. It's a tour.
Sweet.
You're opening for him. Doing a little AC rapping. Yeah, there you go. All right.
Totally.
See you guys.
See you. Peace out. Cool, yeah.